Hi everybody, Matty Jackson back here with the Academy North, the Evening Session podcast. I am back here with Ste and Henry again. Check us out on all social medias, the thing I usually forget to say. It's at Academy North 1 on all of your usual social medias. And today we are joined by Nick Hoult, the chief cricket correspondent for the Telegraph. Hi Nick, how are you?
Hello, how are you doing?
Good, thanks. How's things your end? In New Zealand at the moment?
I'm in Hamilton, arrived yesterday for the third test, which starts on Saturday. I was obviously the tour started in Queenstown, then we went to Christchurch for the first test, and then Wellington for the second test, and now we're in Hamilton where it's raining.
So you just teed me up nicely. Obviously, we're recording this now. You've just set the scene that we are just before the third test, because we'll probably release a bit later. Going to give you a chance to look like a genius here. What are your predictions for the third test?
I think it depends how England get up, or whether they're up for it. If they're up for it, I think they'll win, and they'll win comfortably. But let's see how winning the series and whether that sort of dulled their competitive edge a little bit. It's usually a pretty flat pitch in Hamilton, which will suit England because obviously the way they bat and they can score very quickly, which would bring a result into the equation. So yeah, I think England will win 3-0.
Perfect start the first couple of tests.
Yeah, no, exceeded expectations. England really. I think New Zealand have been pretty disappointing as well. But no, England. They've. I think the addition of Bryden Cast has sort of really lifted their attack and given them an extra gear to go to, and that's been probably the major difference. And he's been all over Kane Williamson, and you know, with Williamson doesn't score runs, you go a long way to beating New Zealand.
You said there about New Zealand being pretty poor. They're obviously fresh off the back of what was called their best ever series win in India. Do you reckon that's taken it out of them a little bit?
I don't know, really. I think they've just been, even though they've played England more than any other team during the Baz Ball era, they've been surprisingly timid when England have gone on the front foot to them. They've got on top in early stages of both test matches, taking early wickets, 40 over 4 in the first test, 40 over 3 in Wellington. And then, of course, Harry Brook starts dancing down the pitch in Wellington, hitting the ball for 6, and that turned the game. Yeah, I don't know. I think their selection's been poor. They picked Tim Southey last week when they probably shouldn't have done, but he's on this bizarre kind of farewell tour. This is his home ground, so he's obviously going to play this week. This is his last game for New Zealand. And yeah, they've sort of, I think they need to rebuild a little bit New Zealand, and they've got some good players. Rachin Ravindra looks an excellent batsman. He sort of wanted to probably rebuild around him, and Will O'Rourke, the young fast bowler, quick, he's very quick.
Yeah.
Nasty bounce. He's whistled a few past the nostrils of England batsmen. So they've got talent. Just need to probably just rebuild a little bit and just get a little bit more positive. The talk here is that the Brendan McCullum effect has sort of worn off now with the New Zealand team. They've sort of gone back to how they used to be, which is a very sort of conservative, don't lose first cricket team. And you can see that they do seem to have regressed a little bit in that direction. But obviously the win in India was totally incredible and unexpected. So they've obviously got the players and got the talent, but it's just been it's been very insipid sort of performance from them.
You mentioned New Zealand's selection a little bit there, especially like with Tim Southey. But just on England's selection, I saw you wrote a piece about Jacob Bethel sort of in the last few weeks. I just sort of wondered what your opinions were on that selection. He's sort of grown into the role a little bit now after two tests. Nearly misses out on that 100, doesn't he? Just sort of wondering what your thoughts were on that.
I think he's done really well. I mean, the runs in the second inning have come in the second inning, so sort of bear that in mind a little bit. But even in the first innings, when he's gone out there, it's been seaming around and swinging around pretty difficult conditions. I know he hasn't got a lot of runs, but he's actually shaped up pretty well and looked pretty calm and composed in the first innings, and that probably tells you a little bit more about him than anything else than the runs in the second innings. Obviously, the second innings of the first test, it was just a rush to the line. England needed 100 to win. And then the second innings of this second test, they were pretty well on top with the big first innings lead. But no, he looks the part. He looks a player, and got to say well done to England for their sort of talent ID, which now very much is dependent on the Lions and their own sort of their own sort of talent scouting and how they see players shaping up in their own sort of under-19s and Lions system rather than how they perform in county cricket. That now is pretty much been made irrelevant by this, as far as this management are concerned. So, and that's not strictly true. I mean, someone like Jordan Cox had a couple of really good years. Had a couple of good years before he got selected. But yeah, they will not be picking on numbers now. Probably whilst these guys are in charge. And Brendan McCullum is a gambler. We know that he's a punter, and he will look at selection that way too. And he'll stick his money on 5 players, and if 2 of them turn out to be brilliant, he'll say that's a decent return.
Yep.
And Bethel looks like one of those players. I mean, you've got to be fair. He's taken to it brilliantly, and it's about, I suppose, at test and international level, it's about almost about how they cope with that step up of scrutiny, and he's taken it in his stride.
You mentioned there the sort of the difference between like the county championship and then the Lions tour, especially like in the role of selecting for England. Do you think that's something that's the role of the county championship that's going to change in the future? Sort of like, is it a necessity that the county championship moves up more towards the style that England are playing now, sort of as a tool for selection, and England using in the future?
No, I think counties have to do what's right for them. If the county directors have their jobs on the line and they have to pick teams and players for success in their own competition, and because that's what their supporters want. I think that the natural way the game is going, with young cricketers coming through playing T20 cricket and playing all the shots around the wicket, naturally going to make Test cricket and county cricket a more faster paced game. I think that there is such resistance to change in county cricket that the England setup have recognised that is a waste of energy now. Trying to change county cricket to reflect Test cricket is just never going to happen. So they're thinking, right, okay, we'll just pick the players that we think have got it based on the skills that we see in them. And ultimately, they were judged on that. If they're picking the wrong players and they lose games, they'll get sacked. So, but yeah, the county game is just the schedule's crazy. Obviously, that makes it very difficult to produce flat pitches and that you get in Test cricket, and promote the pace bowling that you get in Test cricket. I think they're almost like different formats now. 4-day championship is about as close to Test cricket as T20 is. I mean, it's just a different format. There are guys who have brilliant county careers who are never, ever going to play for England, ever. You know, they're just not going to have the pace, but they will have the skills to take wickets on English pitches. Something like Jacob Bethel's a good case in point, really, because if he was batting number 3 for Warwickshire in the early season against a Duke ball, which is swinging around and doing stuff, it'd be interesting to see what his average is. But when you stick him on a Test pitch against pace and better surfaces, we see the results.
He's not exactly short of confidence, is he? I saw a few of his comments after the last Test match. That'll probably go a long way for him, I think.
Yeah, no, he said he gets better as he makes a step up, which, you know, refreshing to a young English cricketer say that kind of thing. Yeah, he's going to be a superstar, isn't he? And they've had some good players this year. You know, they've had a couple of misses, but Jamie Smith as well. We forget about him because he's not here at the moment, but he had a terrific summer and looks the part. Cast, as we said, Atkinson. You know, they've really regenerated the team this year, more so than they have done. I've been doing this job quite a long time now. I don't remember this team changing that quickly and that successfully in such a short period of time.
Do you think those changes, the players you mentioned there, I mean, obviously Bethel's the obvious one, with McCullum taking over the white ball team, do you think there's going to be some sort of more of a crossover in terms of less players used across international cricket?
I think so, yeah. Certainly with the coaching team. The coaching team is pretty much getting transferred from one to the other. So you're going to get the same philosophy. I think you'll want to sit back and see and assess probably in the early New Year tour to India in January, and then the Champions Trophy, and perhaps just sort of see where he's at, where England's team is at, before making any changes. Harry Brooks can have a big role to play probably in the future of the white ball setup. I would suggest he's probably going to be the next captain very quickly of the white ball team. I think Baz is going to want his own guy in charge, and he'll see that as a. And I actually was saying to some of the guys yesterday, I think captaining in those white ball games against Australia at the back end of the summer was a big moment for Book, and he started that. He ended that Test summer pretty poorly at the Oval against Sri Lanka, looking a little bit too over cocky at the crease, and then that responsibility of captaining against Australia seemed to make a switch in him, and he hasn't looked back since. So expect that. But yeah, I mean, obviously Bethel's already played one-day cricket and white ball cricket, but yeah, he'll be top of the list. We'll see Carves playing, we'll see Atkinson. Ben Duckett's going to play a big role in that team as well, I would imagine, going forward. And it'd be just to see, what other young cricketers out there they're going to pick.
Yeah, I think you mentioned there was selection, obviously looking now, well, not probably, looking definitely in terms of the Test arena. It's pretty much looking towards the Ashes now, isn't it? In 12 months' time, and what it's going to look like there, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's never far away, is it? It's slightly changed a little bit, actually, because we always built that up as a kind of, I suppose, the sort of pinnacle, really, the sort of end, if that's the right word, culmination of the sort of project, but it's not now because they extended Brendan's contract until after the next home Ashes. But obviously, if they lose 5-0 in Australia, then they'll all get removed. So it can still be a big moment, a big line in the sand. Yeah, the team is looking pretty much set up now, isn't it? 85 mile an hour plus bowling, which was seen as so important in Australia and the India series. They've got Carson, got Atkinson. Obviously, they're hoping that Mark Wood will be fit for some of it. Jofra Archer, Ollie Stone, and they're probably hoping that Josh Tongue gets fit this summer. He's with the Lions this winter. I suspect they want to pick John Turner pretty quickly as well. Excuse me. So the team, the top 7, really you could pick now, apart from until Bethel came along and complicated things, but that's a good thing too. So they've got 8 players looking for those top 7 roles. So yeah, they're in they pretty much know their best squad and best players, and we've not always had that a year out from the Ashes. I do wonder whether it's feeling a little bit like it did in 05, perhaps 2004 leading into 05. They settled on their team. And so when they played Australia, obviously that was at home, different, but when they played Australia, it was a settled side. So yeah, and being in this part of the world at the moment, obviously on the same time zone as the Australia series, so it does lend itself to sort of comparisons of where the two teams are at. And you look at the Australian side, and I've been lulled into thinking this before, but you look at them and you think, they are vulnerable. Obviously got great bowling attack, but those guys are going to be a year older, and their batting looks very fragile.
I feel like there's an Ashes prediction coming here, Nick. What do you think?
All the way things are going, I think they've got a great chance of winning next year. I really do, but it all depends on the fitness of those bowlers. If Mark Wood's not fit, if Archer's not fit, if Atkinson goes down or Cast, they'll struggle. It's about getting the bowlers on the park and getting them fit and firing, and having 4 or 5 of them, not 2 or 3. They have those, they've got a chance. They haven't, they've got no chance.
What do you think, Nick? Obviously, it's always the biggest series, and always seem to be always planning for the Ashes rather than always sometimes the here and now. Where do you stand on that? Because sometimes they bypass a couple of series, don't they? And then they might draw a few or whatever here and there. But where do you stand on that? Should always be planned towards the Ashes or what's in front of you? Because obviously that's around Jimmy Anderson still as well, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's a question that when they first started, these guys, they'll very much be where your feet are. It's very much we on the here and now. We're not looking ahead, and that changed when the penny dropped with them last summer, when they didn't win the Ashes and they should have done. And I think then they realised, okay, this is how you are judged in English cricket. I just think it's inevitable. Every team is judged that way. Every generation of players going back forever. And no, it's not always healthy, but it's probably just it's just a fact of life in English cricket. And so they play a lot of Test cricket as well. So 17 Tests this year. How many we've got next year? Not as many next year, actually. Only 11, I think, if you include the Sydney Test, which happens in January. So they play a lot of Test cricket. You can't always be looking ahead 2 years, but the Ashes do come around pretty quickly, because we'll get to the end of the next Ashes series in February. We'll play that summer, which I think is South Africa, Pakistan, and then you think, well, actually, the following year the Aussies are back again in 27. So it does. This sort of planning for the Ashes is constant, because it's looming very, very quickly, and yeah, I can understand why they do it, because they get sacked if they don't perform in the Ashes.
Yeah, fair point. I'm going to change tack slightly, but stick on Test cricket if we can. Obviously, Stokes has come out swinging about the over rates and not signing his umpires' forms. And what obviously you're covering, I think when I captain, I've never signed an umpire's form, but slightly different level. What's the feeling kind of around your circles with that? Obviously, you're watching more Test cricket than any of us. His argument of, well, it didn't go 5 days anyway. Where does that land?
That's really relevant, I think, whether it's gone 5 days or not. Because I agree. There's many factors, can't it? A team can, get bowled out for 80 or whatever. But it's, I think I'm probably the worst person to ask, really, because I'm lucky I never pay for a ticket, so I never come out feeling shortchanged. And but the one thing I will say is I've never found Test cricket more entertaining and interesting to watch than now. So if you're a few overs down, but you've been entertained, does it matter? That's always thing. But then, obviously, I don't pay for my ticket. But I can't believe anyone has gone away from any England fan has gone away from any of the days Test cricket we've seen in New Zealand and felt shortchanged because they've lost a few overs. There's so many stoppages now, and not all of them are down to the players. We have constant DRS checks, umpires checks, that are not DRS. So it'd be things like checking whether a ball has touched the boundary sponge. That can take ages. Checking whether catches have carried, checking no balls, checking every single run-out decision, even if it's blatantly obvious it's not out. That all goes on for ages. And then, of course, Stokes doesn't help by the fact that we all probably admire his kind of tactical acuity and imagination, but that takes time as well. He's changing the field every ball, so he does bring it on himself in that regard. I just think 90 overs now is gone. I just don't think you're going to get that very often, apart from in the subcontinent where there's a lot of spin bowled. And one way of doing it would be to start earlier. I don't see why in the UK we don't start at 10:30. Starting at 11 o'clock is always very late to me. Why not start a little bit earlier? Same here, they're starting 11 here. Luckily, a bit like England, the long evenings, so you can get away with it a little bit more. And the docking of points, the way it's done in the World Test Championship is just really weird as well, because the over rate punishment's only kicking after 80 overs. So England were just as slow at bowling the overs in Wellington, but didn't get fined or punished because New Zealand were bowled out before. They didn't bat 80 overs, so they didn't count. And at the Ashes last year, England's over rate and Australia's over rate was very similar. But England never batted 80 overs because they were, very rarely, because they were scoring so quickly and getting out. Because of some Khawaja and the others were blocking the hell out of it for 2 days, the Aussies often batted 110 overs, and that meant the over rate rules kicked in, so England were punished. They probably deserve to be punished, but there's a little bit of a disparity there, a little bit of an inconsistency that kicks in after 80 overs. People have suggested the fines don't work because the players have got so much money these days. Maybe in-game penalties, but
the can of worms, isn't it?
It is. And over rates have always been slow. It's not a historical fact that they've always been slower than people think they were back in the day. But look, I would say I've never felt Test cricket more entertaining than it is now. I've been watching Test cricket in this job for about 20 years, and I've never felt it more entertaining than right now. And we're seeing that around the world. Australia, India, what a great series that was. New Zealand beating India in India. There's so many great results going on, and so much good cricket being played that I think overrates is overdone, and also not one of the biggest issues that we need to worry about.
I think you've kind of teed it up nicely there. To obviously, you had a very large hand in writing the book on Bazball. Do you think that England's approach, the Bazball approach, do you think that's changed the way other teams are looking at things as well, regardless of whether they're playing England or not. And it's kind of helping to change Test cricket imitation, I guess.
That's a good, not necessarily. Not yet. I think some teams are. I think you'll never see the Australians change the way they play, or admit they're changing because they've seen England do something. And their form of playing Test cricket at home is very successful, so we'll never see them change. You'll never see India admit it either. I think a lot of nationalism comes in when it comes to baseball. But I think naturally, like I said earlier, players are more aggressive and can play to the best players. Say someone like Jaiswal of India can play two ways. He can play a Test innings or he can play a T20 innings in a Test match, regarding on the situation. Rohit Sharma as well, obviously. So, you are going to get that natural change for that reason. And maybe where we are seeing it is teams taking more of a risk with trying to win first rather than trying not to lose first. That may be something we're seeing a little bit more of around the world. But at this stage, I sense there's still quite a lot of resistance to it and a lack of understanding. But even at home as well. I mean, when England, every Test match feels like almost a referendum on the way England play. When they win, it's brilliant, and when they lose, it's because they're playing baseball. Often,
100%.
That's not.
I think you touched on it before a little bit with the county stuff. Now, if you're a county cricketer, especially a batter, is it just going to be you have to be so aggressive, or you're not going to sort of get a chance under this sort of regime, are you? So, do you think that'll change a lot with county cricket now, the way they're going about things?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you're a player, you want to get into the Test team, then that's the only way you're going to do it. Some counties, Durham are always held up as an example. I mean, maybe they would be because of Stokes, but they're always held up as an example of a team that's tried to be a bit more aggressive and on the front foot. I think judgments are made on players, like I said earlier, away from the county game. They also seem to be now picking players a lot younger as well. I think if you're a 27-year-old batsman in county cricket and you suddenly put your foot down and start scoring cricket, I don't think it's going to make an awful lot of difference. That must be very difficult for those guys as well, because if you see the door shut, one knock-on effect of that might be that we see quite a lot of good red ball cricketers in the Championship. We don't think they're going to play for England. Suddenly decide they're just going to play white ball cricket. Go down that road, try and get more franchise deals. Because why wouldn't you? Because that's where the money is.
Yep.
And if you're not going to play for England, in English cricket, playing for England is still, gives you a profile you're not going to get anywhere else. If that closes off, then we might see a few more players, particularly those sort of guys getting towards their 30s. Who a few years ago still might have held out hope for a couple more years that they might get a call up. Maybe those guys will think, actually, I'll go white ball only now. So yeah, that's going to be an unintended consequence of it all in the future. But that may mean, obviously, that gives a chance to younger players. So
And do you think that's going to be sustained, Nick? Sort of the picking of younger players, because obviously at the moment they're picking the younger lads that are coming through, but then in 3, 4, 5 years, the young ones they pick now are going to be hitting sort of what would be maybe the sportsman prime. Do you think in that stage they're still going to be picking the 21, 22-year-olds of 4 or 5 years' time, or they're going to stick with the younger lads they've chosen now?
Well, depending on results and performance, but I think they would see the guys they're picking now and be hoping the guys that they're picking now are the ones that are going to have long careers. Evolving a team is always, should be an ongoing process, but every management gets to a point where they've got their group of players, and these are the guys we're sticking with, and they don't generally look beyond that pool for a certain period of time because they want a settled team. So I would think for this set of management, you would think that they'll be gone by after the 27 Ashes. So three and a bit years away. We're seeing the changes now, the building blocks being put in place for that team to see them through that period. Then it'll be somebody else's decision and somebody else's team, and then we'll see some more changes. But obviously, if they lose 5-0 in Australia, it could all get ripped up. So. There's a lot. I mean, Baz is always about the amount of talent in English cricket. And at first, I thought it was just him being the sort of positive guy he is and wanting to make all the English cricket fans feel better about themselves. But actually, I think he's right. I think there is a lot of good talent in English cricket now, and we're seeing it get its chance, and we'll probably see that continuing for the next few months. I don't think we'll see. I think the interesting question is about the white ball team. I think that's where we're going to see young cricketers get the chance. I don't think they're going to experiment much in the Test team now, partly because they're playing the two best teams in the world in India and Australia. So I can't see any real experimentation with that team unless they're forced to by injury to bowlers. So I don't think you'll see a Josh Hoult situation again until after the next, till we're through the India-Australian leg fixtures. But that white ball team, I think they all think that's ready for change. That's where we can give a lot of opportunities to young players and build towards the next global tournament, which is probably 5 minutes away because we're always playing global tournaments. But yeah, that'll be where I think they might start giving players a chance first.
We talked a bit there about, obviously the style of play and what it's like at the baseball and what it's done to Test cricket. What about the environment around the team? There's been a lot of jokes, hasn't there, about got to be good on the golf course. But have you noticed the change in that environment? Is it more relaxed? Is it more laid back?
Yeah, it's not. I've never. Yeah, I mean, this week, have you? Not breaking any secrets. I mean, they're stuck on Instagram, but this week they've been off playing golf and play pigeon shooting. It's like they're not. It's not to say they're not obviously professional and driven and serious about their performance, because they are. But it is a much more relaxed environment than, say, it would have been under Andy Flower, for example, with people on the other end of the street spectrum, or Chris Hillwood before these guys. McCullum is very much, this is the time of your life, go out there and enjoy it. And that obviously does come across sometimes when they lose as the wrong message, but I don't think they care. I think they feel that if you're not having fun off the field, you're not going to have fun on it. But they, like I say, they're a pretty fit team now. They're not. You look at some of these lads in the side; they're proper professional athletes. They're not. And Stokes is looking fitter than ever. He's training hard, probably too hard, which is why his body falls apart all the time. Joe Root would have a net in your back garden if you invited him round. I mean, he can't stop him, help himself. So, they are still a very professional team. But yeah, there is very much an emphasis on where they crack around the laugh as well. I think they've got, I was talking about this yesterday, I think they've learned one lesson. I think that was, I don't know whether you remember, but before the last Ashes series at home, they had a golf weekend in Scotland, which I think was a bit of a stag do. And I don't think we'll be seeing them do that again before an Ashes series. I think the pennies dropped on some of these things that maybe you have to be a little bit more on it, because while England were playing 3 golf courses in Scotland, the Aussies were playing a World Test Championship final. And they obviously won the first test. So, yeah, don't think we'll be seeing that again.
Away from the England team and more onto yourself now, obviously, in New Zealand at the moment, in Pakistan before that. What's a tour like for you? What's a typical an off day like for you? There's no cricket. How would you tend to spend that whilst touring?
It depends really. I prefer covering Test cricket, partly because you don't have these off days. You're away from home and your family. You want to be actually working and at the cricket rather than when you go on cover one day. Well, World Cups and tours, you can arrive. I've arrived in places like Lucknow in India on the Tuesday and the game's on a Saturday. There's only so many times you can preview a game. So I prefer the Test tours because you've got more. The cricket fills the time. But today we're going down to see Ben Stokes at Nets at 12:00. We'll do our interview. He will do an interview separate sort of huddle with the written journalists. So it's about 6 of us. And the reason for that, without boring you too much on print deadlines, is that because of the time difference, we're sort of we have to preview the match in Thursday's newspaper rather than in Friday's newspaper rather than in Saturday's, because obviously by the time you sit down and read your Daily Telegraph on a Saturday morning, as I'm sure you all do, the game will have already started and we've had a day's play. So that's why we do him 24 hours early. There's always, I like going off diary, as we call it. So trying to find interviews. I did an interview this week with Lee Vincent, who I sat down and spoke to the morning of first morning, second test, but obviously I wrote that up between games. Week before I did something on I did an interview with Greg Bartley, the ICC outgoing chair, which we used in between games. And on the last tour to New Zealand, 2 years ago, I flew down to Dunedin between games and did a big piece on Brendan McCullum's background. So I went to his childhood home and where he played cricket. So those kind of things you try and do because you've got to try and do something that's exclusive and different. So yeah, those are but mainly you want to cover Test cricket because it does fill the time. It can track a bit when you've got one T20 on a Saturday and you arrive on a Monday.
I actually read that piece about Lou Vincent just before coming on here, and it was really, really interesting. I really enjoyed it. I just wanted to ask sort of how you go about like getting that particular interview, because it was such a sensitive topic, and sort of like you covered the areas where he's obviously received quite a lot of abuse and is living on his own now. So how, in this particular scenario, have you decided this is what I want to cover, and what's the process in getting him to actually sit down and go over that with you?
I covered the match fixing story at the time 10 years ago, very detailed. I did a lot of work on that story. So Lou had always struck me as a pretty tragic figure, really, as a guy who I felt was probably manipulated by others into doing things. He was a little bit vulnerable. He did what he did, and he deserves to be punished for it. But I felt that there was a story to be told there. And I've been to New Zealand, I think. I was here in 15 for the World Cup, and I was here in 17 briefly, and I was here in 22 for the last Test series. And every time I tried to get hold of him and never got anywhere. And then I sort of started thinking about it over the summer. What am I going to do in New Zealand's a bit different, a bit off diary. I'll try and get Lou again. And in the end, it was just basically getting through. He's got this very tight circle of friends around him and around them, and I think it was getting to those guys that helped. I think probably having handled similar sort of sensitive interviews before this year probably helped too. They saw that we do these things properly if we're going to do them. And it was probably just luck, really. Both plays a big part in this job. You can spend ages and ages phoning people up, getting stuff, and hitting a brick wall. And then one day you pick the phone up, and they say yes. There's a little bit of that involved. I think hopefully it's a sort of recent track record doing these things, and just it was the right time for him to talk. We had a good 45 minutes and nothing was off limits, really.
I read some of your other articles as well, so I just wanted to ask you about the one you did with Barkley, the guy that's stepping down from the head of the ICC, and sort of like the bit that sort of stuck out to me was he was talking about the West Indies, the potential of them to just break up and become their own islands and compete individually in that respect. I just wondered, like, what you think the probability of that is actually happening, if there's a chance that may occur.
0, I would say.
Okay. Thank you.
I would say. Yeah. Maybe. I think the point he was trying to make was that he never thought it was going to happen either. But I can see that. I suppose you can see a point where the West Indies perhaps stops playing Test cricket outside of playing England and India because of the financial cost of putting it on over there. And I think there are going to be more. Greg Bartley played a big role in getting the Olympics, cricket in the Olympics. So that's his thought process there. How there's going to be more of that. The Pan Asian Games. There's going to be a lot more, different games where necessarily you're going to have you can't compete as the West Indies. So I think that's where it's coming from. But no, I just can't see. There's too much. There's also great, rich history there, and we forget the West Indies still beat England quite regularly. So they're not another team. So no, they're not. I can't see that happening. I couldn't believe he said it, to be honest. But But it was he was open because he was leading the role. So that's often the best time to catch these guys.
So the two main things of this podcast pretty much done. They're getting your incredible insight from that and setting you up with Henry. So just before we let you go, we do tend to finish with some quick fire questions, a bit random, and I'm going to let Henry take the lead on this one.
Brilliant, thanks, Matty. Again, just dead quick. There's only 7. So we just want to go. What would be your death row meal of choice?
Good question. Probably a prawn risotto, because I made that last night for the guys here.
Excellent. And one thing you'd change about cricket if you were in charge?
Split the West Indies up into islands.
It's not overrated.
One thing I'd change. Make it easier for Northamptonshire to win the championship. Might be reducing the championship to 5 teams.
Okay. And could you rank Root, Smith, Coley Williamson 1 to 4 in your opinion?
I think you've just done it for me, actually. I would probably go Root, Coley, Smith, Williamson. And that's
if you were... Go on. No, elaborate. Elaborate if you want.
I was only going to say that's based on the fact that Williamson doesn't play that many long Test series, and I think that's a real test of a batsman, playing 5 Test series against the same bowlers.
If you weren't a journalist, what would you be?
I quite like. I was interested in physiotherapy. I'd quite like to have done that. I think I didn't do this. Probably not clever enough, but I did school. But I genuinely, this is not. I would say I wanted to be a journalist from a very early age, and I wanted to be a sports reporter from an early age. Always did.
One thing you can't go on tour without.
One thing I can't go on tour without. Well, passport's pretty important. I'd say the one thing that's become very important is a pair of binoculars. They always go in the bag first.
And your and your favourite sport that's not cricket?
Running. My own.
Interesting.
I go. Yeah. So watching athletics, probably. I used to love football, but I don't watch it anymore. So I was a Northampton Town fan, and it's not, struggling a bit this year.
Sorry, Henry, I'm going to jump in. This is absolutely not relevant, but you said watching the athletics. I finished watching, has anyone watched Sprint, the documentary on Netflix?
Not yet, no.
It's definitely worth a watch as a sports doc. I'm not huge into the athletics, just the Olympics and things, but a recommendation for everyone there. Very good watch. Sorry, Henry. I'll just let you know what I'm watching.
The last one is, what's your favourite destination? As I'm assuming it means on tour.
Yeah, sure. It's difficult to answer that one. I get asked that one a lot because I have different answers, you see. Australia is the best tour to cover because that is how cricket journalists, like football journalists will say when they retire, I'll cover 10 World Cups or whatever. We'll probably be the same with Ashes tours. And England, I've seen England win in Australia, and it's a great feeling to see that happen. New Zealand is a beautiful place and a very laid-back tour. But I love India. I absolutely love going to India now. I used to be a little bit daunted by going to India, but not anymore. The tour to India earlier this year was fantastic. I would almost put India down as number one now, seeing that it's just such a vibrant country. And everywhere you go is a challenge, is different in different ways. And the food is amazing.
In fact, I think that's pretty much everything from our end. Nick, firstly, thank you so much for your time.
No worries.
You're a busy man with the Test match coming up. You've backed England for the 3-0, so by the time we release this, we'll know if you know what you're talking about, I guess, really.
I'm probably completely wrong. I do worry about them not being up for it this week, but there we go.
after the clay pigeon shooting. But thank you everybody for listening as well. Check us out on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, even TikTok these days, which I know nothing about. At Academy North 1 on all of them. And once again, Nick, thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of the tour, and hopefully we'll catch up soon. Thank you very much.